migrating to Australia. Apparently the number 3 podcast about migration. But David, I have the proof behind us. David Bongiorno, Australia's most approachable registered migration agent, migration lawyer. How are you, David, before we get into the fun stuff?
I'm excited, Grant, about our world domination. I'm looking at the map behind you, and it looks like Greenland and Iceland are two of the very few countries where we don't have listeners.
We'll just go through that in a moment. We did advertise that we had a guest joining us today.
The emergency medicine specialist Ram, Dr. Ram, will be talking with us on Thursday.
So we're sorry if that's what you were really hoping for, but we know that you won't be disappointed. We're going to cover something very, very, very important for our most requested topic, our most listened to subject in
100%.
50 plus episodes so far, David, on this almost 3-year journey that we've been on.
And Grant, this one is our renewal. This is our renewal. We haven't done a partner visa podcast. So
I was teasing it out, David. I was teasing it out. Look,
Bunny, hi.
Now, for those listeners, sorry, you're not going to quite enjoy the fun of this so much, but I've now got the green screen in the studio, which means I can play around with a lovely background. I'm not putting the collection of books that I've never read up behind me. What I have today is a map of all the places where we have listeners. And if I move my head across, David, the white or blue places are where we have listeners. Now, the blue is the most listeners, but you were quite right. Greenland, Iceland,
Mauritania,
North Korea. It looks like Libya, Tunisia, and then some of the
Spanish Sahara.
Yeah, sub-Saharan Africa, some of the Caucasus, a couple of the what do we call them now? The Baltic states, Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia are on board. Good on you, Estonia.
Capital of Estonia is Riga, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or Tallinn. No, Tallinn. Capital of Estonia is Tallinn. Yeah. Remembering our grade 5 and grade 6 geography there.
Oh, don't even get me started. We've got a few holes in the Caribbean, but if I move across, you can see there's a bright white dot in the Caribbean. Dominican Republic never fails. Hello, Dominican Republic. Hello, Panama. Hello, Guatemala. It's great. It's great to have you all on board. We love it. Africa slowly coming around. Remember, it's only a few months ago, David and I was despairing that we weren't getting any penetration in Africa, but that's really kicked on. And Myanmar, they're not listening, but
I don't think they can. I don't think they can listen at the moment, can they?
Well, they've got other things on their mind. Good luck.
Above all, absolutely, yeah.
Good luck. Keep up the good fight. And what else, David? We've had a
great podcast. Yes.
Hang on, no, I'm still wrapping up what's been going on.
Are you ever?
couple of earthquakes for our dear friends in New Zealand, and they've only just celebrated or commemorated, a better, more correct term, commemorated 10 years from the Christchurch earthquake disaster, and now they've got earthquakes and a tsunami warning and who knows what. So I know you wanted to keep this evergreen, so I'll edit that out of our actual podcast. You were right, David. We did do a fantastic podcast the other day. Somebody mentioned to me, I did get a message that it was a little bit off topic. And in a way it was, but in a way it wasn't, because we cover culture and what happens in sport is a bit of a mirror to what can sometimes happen in wider society. So we're gonna talk about it, and it's newsworthy at the moment, and that's what we did. So keep your eye out. There is a controversial episode coming out. I'll just give you the hint. It's about sport. It's about professional sportsmen. That's a good tease, isn't it, Dave?
I think that's a great tease.
And
Today we're getting back. Oh,
hang on.
I can't get a word in today.
One more. I want to get this in at the front. I don't know if anyone can see how tired I look today. David, last night I worked nearly all night working on 53 pages on the website for Migrating to Australia podcast.com. So I think by the time I drop this episode out into the feed, it should be there for people to marvel over. And that the comment section of the website will be the preferred method of contacting me, please, unless you are going to my Twitter, which is there on the screen for you to see. Oh, David, you haven't got. Let me just put this one up for you. Where are we?
The ticker tape.
There we
the ticker.
The ticker tape for David. All right, David, you did do the tease. We are leaping into the spouse, the partner, the prospective marriage visas.
I'm too scared to talk.
No,
I don't want to cut you off again.
And there we are. It's all yours.
I'm on my feet, literally and metaphorically. I'm away from Melbourne at the moment, and I'm doing this about 100 k's outside of Melbourne. Hope everybody can hear me well. Today we're looking at partner visas. It's a refresher. We haven't done one on partner visas, despite what Banny thinks, for 2 years. And it's important because people love having information about partner visas. It's a very convenient and important way to come to Australia if you have a loved one here who's your partner, same-sex partner. It doesn't matter. People want to know, and we're going to talk about today, the 820-801 visa, which is the onshore partner visa. We're going to talk about the 309-100, which is the offshore partner visa. And to start it all off, we're going to talk about the 300 visa, the prospective marriage visa.
Yeah. David, what are the basic differences?
The 300 visa is a prospective marriage visa. It gets you to Australia as a fiancé. And the story is the evidentiary burden is less, but the time spent waiting offshore is quite considerable. Now, if you're a fiancé, the threshold is essentially two adults known to each other. How would that happen? How would you do it? You're on a holiday. You go to Italy. You go to Greece. You meet somebody in Italy or Greece. You hang out with them. You travel with them. You come back to Australia. You communicate with them. When you're allowed to travel again, pandemics aside, you go back and see them. And you've built a long-distance relationship and you've become engaged. Then you've got the evidence through travelling together, visiting them in their home country. You've got the evidence to lodge a prospective marriage visa. It's a visa that gets you here in contemplation of marriage. The visa takes quite some time to process, but it gives you 9 months from when it's granted to get married and lodge onshore an 820-801 partner visa. People get these numbers confused. I'm going to repeat them again. 300 visa is a prospective marriage visa. 820-801, a double visa. The 820 visa is temporary residency. The 801 is permanent residency. That's the onshore partner visa. The offshore partner visa is the 309 visa that gets you to Australia, and the 100 is the permanent residency from that. They're two double visas.
Now, David, a question. I get all the tricky questions, all the good questions.
Good.
If someone is a resident of a country where they don't recognise trans rights and they are in a relationship with an Australian, does that complicate the process because part of the evidence and whatnot is being recognised as a couple and as a genuine relationship in the home country?
Not so much. That's the evidence. The important evidence. It's an Australian visa, whichever way you look at it, and the visa is assessed even as an offshore spousal visa. You will have Australia assessing your evidence cohabitating in a foreign country or a third country. For a prospective marriage visa, the evidentiary burden is less, and you can have evidence of showing you're two adults known to each other. You might have visited that person's home country, or you might have met in a third destination and had a holiday together. So in terms of evidentiary burdens and gender, Australia recognises same-sex relationships. Australia recognises heterosexual relationships. It's about two adults. A partner visa, well, let me go back. The prospective marriage visa gets a person from a country to Australia to marry someone who is their Australian partner. An offshore partner visa is where an offshore couple who are living together, cohabitating together, marry, and the 309 brings the foreign partner, the offshore partner, to Australia with the Australian partner, and the 100 is granted onshore. Now, have you got that? Does that just...
Well, I just want to extend it a bit further.
Go for it.
There we are. Now, we know that with the skilled work visas and the even tourist visas, any of the visas, some countries are discriminated against.
They are 100%.
Because of a variety of reasons, but there is particularly the one where people do not meet the terms of their visa and they end up overstaying. That's the big fear of the government at here at the moment. Are there countries that are discriminated against, do you think, in this process for these visas? And again, I'm thinking, how difficult is it to bring someone, and
we brought people in from Lebanon, we brought people in from Nigeria, we brought people in from a number of countries that Australia unfortunately treats with suspicion. To answer your question, Grant, Middle East, it's very hard for people to come on visitor visas from the Middle East. It's very hard for people from Equatorial Africa and North Africa. It's very hard for them to come on visitor visas, because a wonderful way to strategize a partner visa is to bring the offshore partner to Australia on a visitor visa, and then they can do an 820, 801 partner visa onshore.
Just before you go on with that, I had someone pose to me, it's quite a while ago, they were refused a tourist visa.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the beginning of the pandemic, the Australian was involved in an accident here and was in hospital.
They were partners?
Seriously injured too. And the same person who had been denied a tourist visa was also denied any visa, and I think it was a visitor visa again that was being applied for, on compassionate grounds, and she was basically going to have to be a carer for the Australian man.
They probably didn't believe it was a genuine continuing relationship. And immediate family, your wife, your spouse, your fiance, these people can come to Australia if a case is put with compelling compassionate circumstances. There are, under the pandemic, travel exemptions, for example. Somebody in that scenario, it's a very unfortunate example, but if that person who was injured was in a spousal relationship or a de facto relationship with the person offshore, then there should have been some compelling, compassionate circumstances demonstrated, given the grave injury, grave illness of the person. Were they in a car crash? Were they?
Yeah, and came off a motorbike. Yeah,
I came off a motorbike.
Yeah,
but the story is if they were merely boyfriend girlfriend, yeah,
because she's been denied a visa twice, 2 different times. Would perhaps the best option for them to eventually be able to come here? Hello, Jesse. Jesse's watching too, by the way, David.
Hi, Jesse.
Would the best option for them, because it looks like she's not going to be able to come here as a visitor. When he recovers, probably needs to go to her country and for them to cohabitate there.
Not necessarily. I mean, if they are 2 adults known to each other, a prospective marriage visa is a legitimate and real way to go. What a lot of people are doing because of the pandemic is they haven't seen their wife or their de facto for a period of time. They're going to the country that the partner lives in, or applications being made for the person to come in. And we've brought a few people in to see their partners, husband and wife teams, husband, wife. Doesn't matter in Australia about sex and gender. We recognise same-sex marriages in this country and same-sex de facto. The story is that people who haven't seen each other can come if they can demonstrate compelling, compassionate circumstances. It's not a free-for-all. But we have brought into Australia offshore spouses to see their Australian spouses when they've got offshore partner visas percolating in the system. For example, someone's in South Africa and there's a 309-100 offshore spouse visa in the system. They're going to wait a long time for that offshore spouse visa, 309 visa component to be processed. So the Australian government will, in certain cases, let spouses de facto see each other in this scenario. We have quite a few people who are onshore at the moment in that situation, and the law has been kind to them because COVID has kept them here, and because they can't really travel home safely, the 309 visa holders are in a position to have their 309 visas granted here, not offshore. The 309 visa, everybody remember, gets you to Australia. And a visa that gets you to Australia must be a visa that's granted when you're outside Australia. But the Australian government, because of COVID, is displaying some flexibility and some compassion with the regulations.
David, viewer question, and I think I know your answer. Hi, David. Do you think the Australian immigration system will open a working holiday visa program for Filipinos in the near future?
No. It would be lovely. But no, I don't, unfortunately. The work and holiday and working holiday programs are an opportunity for young people from certain countries to come experience Australia, work in the bush, get more experience in Australia, be that professional experience or personal life growth experience. But I don't see, it would be great, but I don't see the Philippines getting anything of that nature in the immediate future.
Can I extend the question then? If
Sure.
the Philippines are in that basket that the government isn't likely to grant that class of visa, or make that class of visa available, that's really the right way to term it. What other countries that Australia has fairly near geographic relationship to, or some sort of cultural relationships with, like we have military cooperation with the Philippines?
Yeah, Malaysians and Singaporeans can get working holiday visas.
Who don't? That's the question I'm asking.
Vietnam.
Now,
Burma, Myanmar.
I was hoping you were going to say Vietnam. Is that a reflection of the perception of the rorting? I think that's probably too strong a term, but in recent history, the partner visa system was thought to have been abused by people from particular countries, and that's one of the reasons. Remember when we first started the podcast and I made a comment that I thought this is what the government would do, that they would get much tougher and that they would single out certain countries because of this, and something we're going to talk about, I know, David. I also said, watch the government make it harder for the sponsors, the Australians, to qualify for bringing a spouse in. Do you remember that?
I do indeed. The story with work and holiday and working holiday visas, I don't know the policy behind the countries they choose, but what I do know is that South Americans and Europeans and particular nations in Southeast Asia do get a good ride, a very good ride, and it's a good opportunity for young people to come and see if they actually like Australia, sample Australia. They can come and study off a 417 when they finish. They can study off a 462 visa. It's a wonderful entry to Australia. Perhaps the only thing I'm not a fan of, and you're not a fan of either, is the bushwork. The bushwork, I've never heard anybody in 14 years of immigration say, let me correct myself. I've heard one person say they enjoyed their bushwork. We won't go into bushwork, but all you have to do, if you're interested, is Google Australian news for 417 working visa, 462 working visa, holiday work. People who come are in danger of being exploited during their bushwork. It's not 3 months in the bush, 88 days, whatever it is. I've never heard anybody say they had a good time, but people are doing it. People are doing it because it's a means to an end.
I suspect, David, that the conditions of the pandemic, where Pacific workers particularly have not been able to come in and work in the horticultural industry.
I think they're up in Darwin at the moment. I think they've been a small number have been allowed into Darwin.
Some have, but the complications within Australia with the borders being closed between states has also meant that the sort of flow of itinerant pickers that has always been the mainstay of the labour available to the horticultural industry in Australia is not available. I think this might be a wake-up call because they've realised that they can't attract regular people to work on the farms because of the conditions that have applied. So
that's what if people Google, they'll hear horror stories of the conditions of many people sleeping in barns, many people sleeping on floors, many people paying exorbitant rent to sleep on floors, sleep in barns, and people getting very little money.
Now, I'm just watching the comments, David, and questions.
Are they coming on Facebook? Are
they? Yes, they are coming in from Facebook. It's a continuation of what I asked you, David, and you're probably not going to advance a reason. But what do you think is the reason why Filipinos won't be able to join the working holiday visa program?
I could answer that off air to the Filipinos asking the questions with no problems whatsoever. I don't want to go on air into government policy on who is suitable for what visa.
I think I alluded.
I might get in trouble. Yeah. I don't want to get in trouble. But the story is this: just because a certain nation, a certain country, or certain countries are precluded from the 417 and precluded from the 462, they shouldn't carry over any fears that they'll be precluded from other visas. Somebody from the Philippines who is not given what probably would be a 462 if it was going to be granted can still come here and study, can still come here and visit on professional purposes. Plenty of Filipino business people come to Australia. And also, too, the partner visa. Australians not stopped on who they fall in love with, and they're not banned from bringing to Australia people they love. Doesn't matter what country they come from. We've been doing partner visas since 2006. We've brought people in from Nigeria. We've brought people in from Lebanon, from Saudi Arabia. We brought people in from everywhere. The story is, just because you don't get a 417 or 462 doesn't mean you're precluded from other visas. You've got to satisfy the criteria for the other visas and you'll be granted a visa. How quickly you're processed on that visa does to some extent depend upon what country you do come from, though.
And we've done an episode on satisfying the genuine temporary entrant criteria. I think it was somewhere around episode 13, I think. Or,
good memory, Grant. Good memory.
Only because I was working on them all last night, Dave. What we do know, and this will probably help with the answer for Jesse, is that Australia takes the risk of overstaying very, very seriously, and that
What happens?
You need what we've always discussed. Sorry, David, to cut you off. Is that you need to demonstrate that you have ties that mean that you will go back to your home country, or you need to be bringing significant skills or resources. So that means you satisfy the general skilled migration criteria to come in some other way, if it's not as a partner or as a student. Does that make sense?
It makes sense. The story for people, don't despair missing out on a 417. Don't despair missing out on a 462. There are other ways to come to Australia that are legitimate and real, and they depend upon your skill, your talent, your intellect, what you have in Australia, what you have in your home country, as Grant was mentioning. For Jesse in the Philippines, the story is this. We brought plenty of business people into Australia. We've brought plenty of spouses into Australia, plenty of students into Australia. Jesse, you can come and study in Australia if you wish. You can make a business visit if you're a business person. And if you have an Australian partner, there's nothing to stop you coming to Australia. Just because the work and holiday or working holiday, 462, working holiday 417 are not visas that you can come and apply for on the basis of your passport, doesn't mean that you're not excluded from other visas. You're only excluded from the 417 and the 462 because only certain passport holders can get them. People who hold passports from certain countries. Hope that answers your question.
Okay, David, do you want to now broach the issue of the tightening up of the situation for Australians who are sponsors?
Yeah, what's happening? Well, Grant and you and I have sort of talked about this over the years, but the Australian government believes in states it's going to happen this year, that the sponsor will have to be approved first. The sponsor will have to be approved first before a partner visa can be lodged or a prospective marriage visa can be lodged. The partner has to be approved. What that means is they have to be Australian police check to show that you are not a threat to your partner offshore. And the story is that we don't know how long the processing will take. We don't know what form the processing will take. Well, it'll certainly involve police checks. And that means that under current law, the character of the sponsor is always assessed. That's not a new addition. It's just going to take place at the front of the application. And they're saying that June, July of this year, or maybe a bit later, anybody who's an Australian citizen or an Australian permanent resident or an eligible New Zealand citizen, any of these people will be able to sponsor still, but they'll have to be approved as sponsors before a partner visa can be lodged, a prospective marriage visa can be lodged, or a partner visa can be lodged. Under current law, what would happen is a prospective marriage visa would be lodged, or a partner visa would be lodged, and the sponsor would be assessed in the course of the visa application being processed. What happens now, or in July, maybe October, the sponsor has to be approved, and then a visa can be lodged. That has problems if somebody comes here, if they're allowed to come here, on a visitor visa. A person on a visitor visa will have 3 months, and if a sponsor approval takes 4 months, there's some real logistical issues. So you could almost say that Australia wants to control the flow and way, which is, as we agree, making things harder. They want to control the way people are coming, because if you come on a visitor visa and marry off it, that's not an issue so long as you have no further stay. But if you want to extend your visitor visa and there's an argument that you're not a genuine temporary entrant because you're extending it to marry. Well, policy allows, and this is where you'll need somebody to help you argue your case. The argument that you're not a genuine temporary entrant because you're marrying someone can be countered, and I think that people need to get legal advice when and if the implementation of this policy comes into effect in July or October, because you don't want to apply for a visitor visa to stay here longer so that your partner, your sponsor approval can come through and you can do your partner visa if the department's going to be asking questions. You can marry off a visitor visa. You can. But if you have no further stay, that's the key.
David, going back
does
to
that make sense, Grant?
That does. That's one issue.
What I'm worried about. I'll tell you what I'm worried about. I'm worried about people who come in on a visitor visa and they've got 3 months to marry their partner or register their relationship under state law, which has its own issues. And then if the 3 months are up and there's a policy that they have to have their sponsorship approved before they can do a partner visa, they're going to run out of visa. So it's all good to prepare a partner visa, but you can't lodge it until the sponsorship's been approved. And we just don't know at this stage how long the sponsorship will take. So if the sponsorship takes 4 months and you've only got a 3 month visa, you've got to apply for another visa.
Yeah.
Now you can get another visa. You can, but it's how you argue the case to get the new visa that will be the win or loss for the person on the visitor visa.
And that's where, as you always say, it's unwise to do complex parts of immigration process without professional advice, and that's
it. Without professional advice, and I mean, what we're talking about may not. We've talked about this for a few years now. It may not come into effect, but the Australian government at the start of this year said, yes, it is happening, and watch this space in July or later in October. In this country, we can do.
Sorry, David. Just before we leave this issue of the sponsor, I know we'll obviously have to update the situation in July or September, whenever.
Correct.
Whenever the actual legislation and the policies are firm. But my concern has been that this will be a move that the government is making, similar to the way they have tightened up general skilled migration and made it harder for people who are of limited means to get into Australia. I'm worried that for, let's use a lovely Aussie term, a battler may have trouble securing a partner visa for someone from, let's say, Philippines, Vietnam, Mexico.
Great question. Great question.
Or say the Caribbean, whereas someone who lives in Toftsville and is a doctor will have no trouble whatsoever.
Correct. You're correct. But it's interesting you say that. We have coming onto the program a doctor who is an Australian citizen, an English citizen, and a former citizen of India, an OCI card holder. And he did his own visa and he was rejected, and it was an outrage that he was rejected. So he's an exception to the rule, a man of exquisite intelligence, and he's going to be talking about his experience as an Indian, Australian, and an Englishman, and also about frontline medicine here for COVID, because he's an emergency medicine specialist. That's coming up. But to answer your question, Toftsville, yes. Toftsville works.
Yeah. So do you think that there may be a situation of discrimination based on the wealth of the Australian when it comes to spouse visas?
Absolutely, because, there are periods of you're precluded from drawing on social benefits for a couple of years. Depending on the visa you apply for, social benefits are not necessarily automatic. What happens is this. Those from, as you called, colourfully Toftsville, that is, people of means, substantial means, are able to look after their partners, so that's never an issue anyway. We have represented some wonderful people who are less economically fortunate than those who are, and they still get visas. They can still get visas. What the UK has done is have an economic threshold for the sponsor. We do not have an economic threshold for the sponsor. It doesn't matter what the sponsor earns by means of income or benefits. So there's no preclusion of sponsorship based on earning capacity or lack of. But in the United Kingdom, they do. I think it's £35,000. It might have changed.
My concern is that because the government, the force, are not stipulating any kind of threshold, is that it will all be discretionary, and that's my concern. That
we've helped people.
My concern, David, is that we don't know what's going to happen after July, so that it doesn't really matter who you've been helping now, because you might get a battler from Doveton or a farm labourer from Billawheeler.
We've had them. We're not from those necessarily places, but we have had battlers, as you call them.
Later in this year, they might be applying to be the sponsor, and the government looks at them and goes, "This guy's earning 28 grand." No,
I'd be very disappointed, and I'd be very surprised if they were to bring in an economic threshold. I'd be very, very surprised. I'd be very disappointed as well.
Fingers crossed that they don't.
I know the UK have it, and I don't know if they've dropped it because it was very unpopular, but I've spoken to people in Mauritius who've had partners. They're coming to Australia to study now, who've had partners that haven't been able to sponsor them because they can't meet the £35,000 threshold, or it's either £28,000 or £35,000 threshold. I think it's an odious act, whatever the income level is in the United Kingdom. But if it was brought here, I'd be disappointed and very upset.
Now, let me just interrupt the flow for a second, David, and to put out an invitation. Excuse me. An invitation to listeners or viewers, because people might be watching this on YouTube at some later date or on the website. You can see my Twitter and David's Twitter and his Instagram floating on the screen. For the listeners, Grant at Work the Cloud Oz and David Bongiorno at
David Bongiorno Twitter. Did you get
on both of the platforms, or a comment via the Migrating to Australia podcast.com website? You can put any sort of issue to us about spouse, partner visas, prospective marriage visas, the whole gamut, onshore, offshore. If there's things that we have not adequately clarified for you, just pop them along. We'll get to them in a future episode. And of course, if you are in the process and you're having trouble or you need some support, you just go to the Migrating to Australia podcast.com website and you click on the button that says book an appointment with David, and David will, of course, help you. And David, we did not do what we have to do.
Good point.
You know what I'm going to do, don't you?
Go for it. I know exactly what you're correct, 100% correct. Go for it.
The information contained in this narrowcast podcast is general in nature and is not specific legal advice. And if you do rely on the information in this podcast as specific legal advice, David, you are
a galah,
or
a goose,
or
silly. I'm running out of birds.
Or a drongo. You got to get the drongo in.
That's it.
And so, yeah, there's a warning. If you do have a specific instance where you want specific advice, that's to be directed to David specifically. Any comments that we make on the podcast, my stuff is opinion, David's stuff is general, and I'm not the professional. David is the registered migration agent.
The story with partner visas too, if you're offshore, there's always there's the strong possibility you're going to be interviewed. Now, the interview is often, depending on the post, an ambush. You might be going about your daily business in your home country and you get a phone call. Yeah, g'day, Grant. It's the High Commission. Want to have a chat about your partner visa. Now, the ambush is another...
Sorry, what's your name? Which embassy are you from?
Who's my partner? What's my date of birth? What's my ID? My driver's license number?
If I was answering the call, I would say, it's very nice to hear from you, Mr. What was your name? Sorry, I didn't catch it.
What you want to do? You always want to be aware of your situation. You always, but you can't.
I'm busy at the moment. I'm at work.
That's it. What you've got to do if you are ambushed, don't pull over the car. Don't close your meeting. Don't usher your colleague out of the office to answer them. Rearrange it. Book a time, and they won't give you their number. They'll ring you back. They won't give you their number. So what you do is you say, look, Stephen, thank you for the phone call. I can't talk at the moment. Could we talk at this time tomorrow? And then reacquaint yourself with your material. Remember, learn. What colour are your partner's eyes? Where was your partner born in Australia? How old is your partner? Does your partner have any kids? Were they in a formal relationship? They're going to test you on your application. They're going to test you. So make sure if you're doing your own visa application, for 300 visa to come here as a sponsor, if you're doing a 300 visa to come here as a fiance, or 309-100 visa to come here as offshore spouse of an Australian partner, or you're doing it, you won't be interviewed onshore. But if you're doing a 300 to come here as a fiance, or 309-100 to come here as an offshore spouse, they will interview you. Be prepared. Know your material. Know your material.
Now, David, is there a benefit? And I'm taking us back just a little bit, so I'm sorry, but I will come back to the process of the questions and what you need to be aware of. Is it beneficial? Does it give any advantage for the Australian to go offshore to the partner, fiance country and to marry there and then to lodge there?
309-100 has its own processing time and it's one government fee. A 300 has its own processing fee, and then an 828-01 to complete the 300 has an extra fee. So going 300, 828-801 is 2 visas. The second one is a double visa. The 309-100 is one double visa with 1 fee for government and 1 fee for a person to represent you if you do it. Going offshore, what you're doing if you go offshore and it's a fiance visa, getting married offshore, you're leaving your place of employment, you're leaving your house you rent, or the house. So it's of no real benefit.
Well, it for some people it might be.
Depends on people's facts. Depends on everybody's facts and circumstances. Individual facts and circumstances. We never treat cases for 300s and 309-100s alike because everybody has different facts and circumstances. But if somebody was on a 300 or was going to apply for a 300, but their sponsor moved to live offshore, well, they do a 309-100. Or they could do a 300 and come back together. I mean, every case is different. There's no hard and fast rules. It depends on the circumstances behind the case, how much money the person has as a sponsor. Are they employed? Do they own their own house? Is the person who's working offshore contractually bound to spend X amount more time in their place of employment? Is COVID preventing them from doing anything? There's so many variables that each case needs to be assessed individually.
And that's really the point to draw out of, or one of the main themes to draw out of the
correct
that will apply to you, as David has just clearly said. Every couple and every individual in a relationship has a different story to tell.
Correct.
And that's what gets assessed. Now, David.
Correct.
Evidence
is gold. Evidence is gold. People get all excited about bank statements. Bank statements are not the be-all and end-all. They are nice. Shared finances are nice. They are nice and they're powerful. But I mean, what if your offshore spouse or your fiance has a love of shopping, a love of gambling. There's nothing wrong with money for salaries going into one account. Every case, tying back to what we were saying before, is different. Every case is different. With finances, if you do not share bank accounts, make sure you help each other financially. Make sure there's evidence of transfers. Travel together, joint air tickets, 28A, 28B, Air New Caledonia flight from, France to New Caledonia, where you meet your French partner. The story is evidence. Here we are in front of the Eiffel Tower when I went to visit my French partner. Here we are at Niagara Falls when I came to see my American partner. Here's the boat ticket we took to travel under the falls. Be like magpies, right? Not Collingwood magpies, birds, and collect everything. Collect everything.
Hold on to everything.
Put it in the cloud, save
Copy,
it.
Yes. Photocopy important documents and then
Absolutely.
electronically copy them and save them. It's so easy now with OneDrive, Google Drive, Apple.
Rock concert tickets, theatre tickets, meeting grandma in the hills of, in the Pyrenees. Anything to show you're part of the family of your offshore partner. They're a part of your onshore family. If you've had a long distance relationship and your partner from Argentina has come over for Easter, show Easter celebrations in Australia. Now, in terms of evidence, photos are great. Bills, receipts. If you are here already and you're doing an 82801, joint membership of the library, joint membership of the gym, joint member, any social clubs, sporting clubs, joint memberships. Very easy to get stored. Charge cards, joint name, mobile phone, internet, joint credit card, joint debit card. There's a whole host. Given the proliferation of paper and the electronic capacity to store paper, there's no excuse not to have good evidence. Another form of good evidence, if you're doing an offshore spouse visa and you're here, or you're doing a fiancé visa, emails, gift cards in the post, gift cards online, care packages. The last time your fiancé from Mauritania came to Australia, no, bad example because it'd be very hard for a Mauritanian to get a visa to Australia. If somebody from South Africa came to visit you and they loved Vegemite, here's 2 kilos of Vegemite sent back to your partner. Keep all of these things to show that you're in each other's hearts and minds. Paper trail is wonderful. Email, I'm a big fan of email, Grant. Big fan.
Yeah, I'm amazed. Oh, look, no, I'm not amazed, but people say, I meet people, talk to people who say, I don't have an email account. And I'm thinking, that's insane because, the big Facebook war with Australia happened. And
correct.
And stuff goes away,
Stuff goes away, correct.
100%. Ask Donald Trump how valuable his 60 million Twitter followers are now. He lost everything. He lost all of his followers, all of his contacts, all of his ability to speak to people in a couple of days. Every platform shut him down. That could happen to anybody.
Big fan of email for that reason. Also a big fan of email because you can articulate hopes, dreams, everything you plan. People who communicate on WhatsApp don't do that. They don't do that.
No, and
long-form communication, more long-form communication and less short-form. We don't want to inundate a case officer with rubbish like, hi, how was your day? How was your day? Good. Was yours good? Problems at work. Oh, love you. Sleep well. None of that mundane rubbish. That shows contact, of course, but do you think a case officer is going to get excited and pay attention to reading 4,000 WhatsApp messages? I don't think so.
And the other thing too, a lot of cultures, a lot of countries now, people, they don't want to send you a text message that you can save. They want a video chat, and it's pretty hard to save that stuff.
It's very hard to save. Very hard to save. Very hard to save.
So if you are trying to build an evidentiary case to support an application,
email's great. Email's fantastic.
If you are preferring video calls to texting, writing actual letters or emails, you're actually making it harder for yourself because if you're contacting each other 4 times a day for a year, well, that's pretty solid evidence. But if you
But
can't save it, or you haven't saved it, it doesn't exist. If you can't put it on someone's desk or
correct,
attach it on to
a PDF or JPEG,
a PDF, and it goes in your IMI account, your immigration account, well, then it doesn't exist.
correct. And why it's important too, because it's another means by which you can express your feeling and sentiment for a person. You're not going to go into great professions of into great confessions and admissions of love and admiration for somebody on WhatsApp, because it's not designed for that. WhatsApp's designed for see you in 5, just around the corner, but it's designed for short form communication. Long form communication, be it by email or letter, is fantastic. You can do your Facebook and you can do your messengers, but by all means, please consider the use more of email, because email allows you to express yourself, and it's far more interesting for a case officer to assess than 4,000 short form WhatsApp messages and Facebook Messenger messages. Does that make sense?
Totally. I know people don't understand it when they when we talk about it. People go, "Well, why?" Well,
you don't get a flavour of a relationship through WhatsApp messages. You just don't.
And the other thing you have to bear in mind is that you can't expect the case officer to believe what you say. You have to be able to convince them absolutely that there is no possible reason to doubt the genuine relationship that you are engaged in.
If your partner's in a less financially fluid position, and you fly them to a third country, you holiday with them in that third country, you show bank transfers. That's another one. The evidence of written financial is very important, and the trail is, there's no excuse with electronic recording and accounting of everything that financial and email cannot be used in greater strength and greater use than it currently is. WhatsApp messages and Skype logs are good. Yeah, they're good, but they're not enough.
Now, I think we've done that one completely. Dave, I want to ask you what are some of the traps or some of the biggest mistakes that you've seen people make when
people doing their own application and not providing evidence, or thinking they've uploaded the evidence but not actually uploaded it. And so they get emails saying, please provide evidence, or they can get an application decided in the absence of evidence, depending on how the case officer feels. And that's tragic. We're helping some people in the past. We've helped some people in the past who haven't provided evidence because they didn't know they had to, or if they change their email address after lodgement, they don't get a reminder from a kinder case officer, a request for information from a case officer. So when you give a department an email address and a phone number, if you change that email address and phone number, you have to tell them. You've got a notification of change of details, and you've got to let them know. If your passport expires and you get a new passport, you've got to change the application details. You've got to let the department know. You have to, because otherwise, how do they communicate with you? How do they tell you, we want your passport photo in a clear resolution? We know your passport's expired. Where's your new one? People who lodge their own visas have to be aware of these things. They have to.
And the really obvious thing, but we need to say it again, reinforce it again. Dates are set in stone.
Dates are set in stone. When do we meet? When do we fall in love? When do we commit to the exclusion of others? You have to be on the same page. If you're disagreeing,
and I think I used the term that the department doesn't care about romance.
No.
If you are saying to the department that you are an exclusive couple, which is part of the test,
you've got to be
that you must have discussed it, but not only must you have discussed it and agreed to it and sort of made the rules, you have to be able to show that you've done it. So the best way to do it is in an email that is totally unromantic, but you can go, oh, I was thinking about what we said last night on the phone.
100%.
It's really great that we've taken the next step and that we're now an exclusive couple. Bloody, 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 blah.
And and that's usually performed when the partner onshore, the Australian partner, goes to visit the offshore partner after a long break. They realise how much they need each other and they commit to an exclusive relationship. And that's often, the first night back or their first night unified in the third country, they talk about the commitment to the exclusion of all others.
And I'm not giving relationship advice, but
we haven't touched on processing times because processing times vary.
Just before we do, David, I just wanted to make the point that some cultures are very, very different in what they understand happens and what the rules or what the progress of a relationship is with different markers, different landmarks, right? Someone in Australia, or I will probably say in any of our like Western cultures, probably will not automatically think that meeting your parents and going to your familial home means you are exclusive. But in some cultures, that seals the deal. So what you need to both do is make sure you have clarified it for each other and you record it, like we've just said, in an email, because when you have the interview, that's the date that you both know. That's the date that you both can say, this is when we became an exclusive couple. And then this is the date where we consolidated our finances. This is the date where we talked about buying property or where we will live, all that kind of stuff.
And you augment that type of stuff with, like, if you talk to the real estate agent, you have an email from the real estate agent. If you're mum and dad, you've met mum and dad, your email to your partner is, God, mum loved me. I can't believe it. I was so nervous coming to meet mum, but she approves of me. And the offshore spouse says, yes, mum loves you.
Or she didn't like me.
Or she didn't like me.
It's going to take a few months, because that stuff happens, but it doesn't invalidate your relationship.
I mean, it's the more you think about it as an exercise in evidence gathering, the more practical and pragmatic you are, the better you'll fare. If you have your head in the clouds, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing. Even if you're calling on a phone card because you want to cut costs, your 7-Eleven receipt, your purchase of the phone card, all of these things are evidence. Don't throw anything away. Don't throw anything away. Anything connected to your relationship, please keep, because it's worth its gold. It can be turned into something of benefit always.
Yeah, and that's important to note, that if that's the circumstances that you're in, and in some places in the world, that's how things are.
That's right. Correct.
You won't be judged for communicating in that way.
Not at all. Not at all.
What you will be judged on or for is if you say, I didn't keep any of that stuff, but I've been doing it. I promise I've been ringing every day.
I mean, you could think outside the box. If you're simply communicating from a public telephone using a phone card, you'd buy your phone card from the same attendant at the same time and get a declaration from them. You've really got to think outside the box. Lawful, verifiable evidence can easily be created. You just got to look at everything you do to further your relationship.
Now, David, I did interrupt you. So where were you going?
Well, processing times, how long is a piece of string? The offshore spouse visas, the 309-100, times vary. Now, with the fiancé visa, the prospective marriage visa, times vary as well. When you get in for an 828-01, times vary. It depends on so many variables. But I suppose the wonderful thing, once you're in Australia, you're together. So if you've got a 300 visa to bring you here, how long the 828-01 takes doesn't really matter. But if you're doing it from offshore, it can be a long wait. It can be a really long wait. And then people who are apart because the 309-100 has one of the spouses come back to Australia to get the property organised, got the job started, and they miss their offshore partner. Depending on the circumstances, the partner offshore could come for a visit, or the Australian, could come for a visit when they've accrued enough leave in their new job. Every case is different. Like Grant was saying, and we've said this time in, time out on the podcast Migrating to Australia, no two cases are alike. The visas people apply for have set specific criteria. How one friend satisfies them doesn't mean you follow your friend and satisfy them that way, because your factors, your ingredients in your relationship are different. Might be your background, your age, your gender, your profession, your occupation, all these things. Each case is assessed on its own merits.
Now, Dave, this is an update on an episode that we did early on in the piece, and there'll be a link to it, and you can go back and listen to it. But bearing in mind that we know there are going to be changes in perhaps July, perhaps August, perhaps September, we don't know exactly, and we will obviously be updating the situation when it happens.
100%.
But forgetting what you know is coming down the pipe, are there any differences? And let's leave the pandemic aside, because the travel restrictions and all that stuff are actually nothing to do with the way the visas are processed.
Correct.
It's just it's an adjunct that applies to everything.
They lead to a delay in every visa, and we can leave it at that.
But are there any particular differences that apply today, exclusive of the pandemic situation, that applied, let's say 2 years ago, 3 years ago?
I think processing times have blown out, pandemic aside. I think
is that it? Otherwise, everything is still being assessed the same
any
way?
Any Australian who has no criminal convictions and is of good character, be they a PR citizen or eligible New Zealand citizen, if they have a legitimate relationship with a person offshore, they have not sponsored serially other people before them, there's no reason why they can't bring in a fiance on a prospective marriage visa or a spouse on an offshore spouse visa. No reason. But the processing times have blown out. They have become a lot longer. There was a wonderful period about 4 or 5 years ago where if you had a decision-ready application, it could be granted very quickly. That was abused, unfortunately, and what it means is the department will sit on the pile and assess everything really carefully, and that takes a long time. If people are coming from Equatorial Africa or Middle East, they're treated with in my opinion, unjustified suspicion, but they get police check, character check, and those checks take a lot longer in those countries than in other countries, and that's one of the reasons for delay.
Do you think, and this is pandemic related, but I think we're going to have a hangover for a little while, certainly past July, September, when we'll do our next update. Do you think that the issue of the Australians stuck abroad who cannot return home because of the limits that the various state governments and federal government have on incoming travellers, do you think that backlog, and then international students, which are essential for the major cities, the economies, do you think that preference will be given to those people entering before potential spouses?
We're still getting. We've got one offshore spouse visa, literally about to be granted in the next week or so. They're still processing offshore spouse visas, and they're still processing prospective marriage visas. And those who've been caught in the pandemic visiting their partners because of the long processing times for prospective marriage visas and offshore spouse visas are being able to have their visas granted here. Those who have not come here and got caught here because of COVID, their visas are still being processed. Whether or not there's any interplay between them and the Australians who are wanting to come home remains to be seen. But I can tell you now, if you put a visa in, it's being processed, 100%. 100%. You're not being put in a queue as such. Your visa's been processed. Like we're very happy with the processing time of a particular 309 that we've almost finalised this week, given we put it in not too long ago. So they are processing. What they are doing for onshore spouse visas is processing them very quickly. So if you're here already,
I guess my question was slightly different, David. That they might grant a visa for someone who's offshore, but the next problem is going to be finding a slot available to actually get here.
Look, if they can get a ticket, you'd be surprised the ingenuity of many. Getting tickets has been an issue for some of our clients. Getting tickets has not been an issue for other clients.
Okay,
depending on what.
That's good to hear, because I think we're tapped out at about 3,000 people a week. I think 3,000 to 4,000 a week.
We've had people flying to Sydney, do their 2 weeks of quarantine there, and then come down. We've got lovely person from America came in, so they're getting flights. If you can get a flight, you get your visa granted, they're being processed, and it's up to the person offshore to get a flight. And nobody, one or two of our clients and one or two people I know are still stuck because they simply can't get a flight. But people who have the means to purchase at the exorbitant prices that the airlines are charging are getting tickets.
Well, that's good to know. David, is there anything else that we must cover now especially for It's Banny Banny?
And Banny Banny, if you're listening, this is an update and new facts and circumstances. So we hope you enjoyed it. We should have you on the show one day. Grant and I love a chat.
I'd love to. Actually, it's Banny Banny. Standing invitation. Contact me either
absolutely deadly serious
or through the website, and we'll have you in on one of the our Thursday nights, which we will talk about in just a moment. Now, David,
the one thing I just want to go over it for those who've joined us late, live, or skipping through it. What we've talked about is the 300 visa. The 300 visa gets your offshore fiance to Australia. When they're in Australia, they've got a visa that's granted offshore to them. It takes nine months of life on it. So you're granted when you're in your home country. You've got 9 months to get here and get married and lodge what's called an 82801. If you're offshore and your Australian partner is also offshore, you can lodge a 309-100. You can. There are other ways to do it. You can bring your partner back on a tourist visa and marry onshore. Everybody's facts and circumstances are different. Some people have business that they have to complete, business they have to tie up. So quite often the 309-100 is a better way to go. Job contracts preclude people from leaving early. Every fact in every case is different. But the 300, just so people remember, the 300 visa gets somebody to Australia, and that 9-month visa granted offshore, they've got to get married and lodge an 82801 visa. If they want to lodge offshore, partners, their husband and wife, or de facto registered relationship, same sex, doesn't matter. If they're recognised under law as a couple, a 309-100 brings them here on the 309. The 100 gets them permanent residency. If they come on a visitor visa, because they have a country that can get them visitor visa and they can show they're members of an Australian family, then you do an 82801 off the back of a tourist visa. Now, the last thing I want to touch on, if you've been in a relationship with an Australian for 3 years or more, that meets the policy definition of long term. If you've been in a relationship with an Australian for 2 years or more and you have a child, that meets the definition of long term. There's discretion for the case officers to expedite the process in both instances. Where people make the mistake is they read about it and they misinterpret it. When you apply, you've got to have at least 3 years. When you apply, you've got to have at least 2 years and a child. And that's a way to expedite the process.
Okay, so that's something that we haven't talked about before, and I wasn't aware of that. So that actually covers, I think that covers off a lot of people who have been maintaining a relationship but have not been in the situation where either one of them can leave where they live. Like,
what happens with those policy? It suits people for the 309-100, and it suits people for the 820-801. If you were living in America and you got your job relocated back to Australia, and you've been living in America for 3 years or more, or you had 2 years and a kid, and then you'd bring your partner back on a visitor visa and do an 820-801 partner visa and request to be expedited.
Now, I specifically want to raise the situation, since we had those questions from Jessie, and she's from the Philippines. There's the culture in the Philippines that so many Filipinos work abroad. So they might be doing a 3 to 4 year contract in the Middle East. But if you've already begun your relationship and you are exclusive, but then they've signed a contract to work in Bahrain or Saudi Arabia or Kuwait or wherever, and they are fulfilling that, if you meet all of the other criteria, that can mean that you are a long-term couple.
No, you've got to be cohabitating. You've got to have a shared life to avail yourself of the policy. 3 years together, living together. That's a mistake that people make. 3 years together.
That was the assumption that I made. So what?
That's why the 309, the 300 visa. If you're doing a fiancé visa, you're not in a position to avail yourself of the policy. If you're doing a partner visa offshore, you have to have been with that partner for at least 3 years, London posting, New York posting, wherever, and two years and a child.
Or you go and live and teach English in Japan or something.
Correct. That's where people come unstuck, because they hear about it, they read about it, and they don't apply it to their facts and circumstances. So to use the Filipino scenario, you'd want to find out the nature of the contract. You'd
go and live in the Philippines for 3 years, 4 years.
Yep.
And that
if you showed shared life with a local of 3 years or more, or 2 years, and you had a child with a local, when you lodged, you could expedite your 309-100. You wouldn't use a visitor visa to get your partner to Australia, because she wouldn't be granted one unless she was a business person. They wouldn't grant her one unless she was a student, but then that would be taking it off the partnership path onto the student path. It
defeats the purpose anyway.
Defeats the whole purpose.
As we've been saying, it all these situations that I'm throwing up are not going to work for everybody.
Correct.
Some people, they will work, but and again, that's the weird and wonderful world of immigration, because everybody's different. So, I mean, I actually know somebody who's been working abroad in Japan for close on 4 years, and he is in a committed relationship. I think about 2 years. He's been.
So what he would do is he'd wait 3 years, he'd keep his contract, keep earning income, or he could bring his wife. He could bring his wife on a 600, because Japanese get visitor visas, no issues whatsoever. They bring them here on Electronic Travel Authority, and what happens is they could lodge on shore an 820-801 and request to be expedited. It's a discretion from the case officer. It's a discretion. They can say no, but when we've done it, we've never had a case officer say no.
And the big takeaway from that is, it's not easy. It's not
no.
And that's why somebody like David is who you need to speak to before you start lodging anything.
People talk about partner visas being easy onshore. They're more difficult offshore because the evidentiary burden is higher. Onshore, you think it's easy to do a partner visa onshore, you need to look at the pages of the MR, the Migration Review Division of the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, to see how many 820-801 visas have gone wrong. They've gone to appeal.
Yeah, and look, anybody who's been a regular listener knows that I'm pretty cynical about a lot of the things that happen, and it's certainly harder than it was 5, 6, 7 years
ago.
ago.
God, yeah, much harder. Much harder. Immigration's changed over the 14 years I've done it since I left crime in 2006 as a defence lawyer. The story is it's got harder and harder. It certainly hasn't got easier. No way. No way.
Now, David, do you want to speak about anything else about the partner visa, the spouse visa,
It's a great way to come. It's a great way to come. You must be 100% genuine. 100% genuine. Because if you try it on with the department, they'll find out. And you're liable for prosecution for migration fraud, among many things. You don't enter bogus relationships. It's got to be genuine and real. If people want to know the consequences, once again, they just need to see what happens. Migration fraud in this country is very serious, very, very serious. It's got to be a genuine, continuing, real relationship.
And I mean, it sort of goes without saying, but if the department decides that you have been a bit dodgy, you'll cop a very long exclusion period. So
also too, the other thing is this: if you've perpetrated fraud, you've got to live with it, and you may have, in inverted commas, got away with it. But then somebody you told 10 years ago you have a falling out with, and that person reports you to the department, your life can be ruined. You might be 10 years in, established citizen, and then news comes that you obtained permanent residency by fraud. You're gone. You're gone. Ciao, ciao.
That's right. Now, David, I'm going to move along to something a bit housekeeping-y. Look at this. Hang on, where is it? Oh, it's not. Where are we? Here we are.
Lovethepodcast.com. I haven't got my glasses on. Lovethepodcast.com at Migrating to Australia. Is that where people can leave testimonials, Grant?
It's a very easy place for most of the major platforms to leave a review. HTTPS, so it's a secure server, / lovethepodcast.com/migrating to Australia. You don't have to remember any hard things to do. So I just thought I'd throw that one up there. The website, by the time this drops, will certainly have a new look functioning website. I'm going to put a poll, a survey up. Do we need to change our logo? Do we need to update our logo? So that's a pretty simple yes or no. I've got my thoughts and feelings about it. I'm sure David does too. And we can go and answer the poll. It'd
be interesting to see what people say. We'll keep our opinions to ourselves. And when we come back on Thursday, it'd be interesting to see what people say.
Yeah, and of course, you're going to be sick of me saying it, but for a little while, I'm going to really hammer it home that we would really like some sort of feedback, some comments, some suggestions when it comes to what you would like us to talk about, because we're going to slightly modify the way we've been doing things. Saturdays, we're still going to be streaming live like this, Facebook, YouTube. I didn't put us out on Twitter today, but generally we'll be out on Periscope. We're going to be adding Instagram, and we're probably going to try Twitch and see if anyone on that platform is interested.
My 13-year-old son will be horrified to see us on Twitch.
Dad, get away from what I'm doing.
Get away from Twitch, Dad. What are you doing on Twitch?
And I'm even going to see if we can do. I've been noticing a lot of lawyers and accountants are invading TikTok. So
I'm on TikTok. I've opened an account. We might give that a promo. I've got 790 followers in one month. That's not too bad.
Well, that's sensational. We'll have to have a crack there. So you'll see all sorts of things happening. But Thursday nights, we're trying to have a regular Thursday night at 7:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Summertime. And when we go off summertime, we'll stick to Australian Eastern Standard Time. So you can check that out. For instance, in that East Asia zone, that's 3 hours behind, and then when we go off summertime, it goes to 2 hours behind. if you're on the other side of the world, you need to consult your world clock on your phones or whatever. And we'll be doing guests, and we'll be talking more about culture, perhaps. And I've invited some pretty well-known people to join us. I won't put the names out there because I haven't said yes yet, but I think we'll be hearing some really interesting stories. Not that everyone that we've had up till now has been interesting, but we're going to vary the format a little bit and maybe be a bit more about culture and less about the law.
Culture's important because when people apply for student visas or people are interviewed for partner visas, they'll be asked about where their partner lives or where they want to study, why they've chosen to study there. And if you can glean any cultural tips from our discussion, they're going to be to your advantage. What we offer with Migrating to Australia podcast is value in every instance.
Exactly. And look, we've been doing it for a while now, and it's been a rocky road, Dave. There's been a few things. There's been a few things crop up, not at least of all the pandemic.
Your health, a few other things. I mean, we're still standing after nearly 3 years and 53 episodes.
And David, are we talking about the wonderful news, the success that befell your professional life this week?
Not yet. I'm waiting for the result on that. No, I'm still waiting for that. So we'll leave that. It's a nice bit of news when it happens. When I get my results.
I might say that David has been doing what all professionals must do in Australia.
CPD.
Continuing professional development. And you elected to do that particular subject, didn't you? It wasn't forced upon you.
I make some silly choices sometimes. One of the good choices I've made was replying to you almost instantly when you reached out 3 years ago. Because remember how it happened? You reached out, you had an idea, you thought we'd get on well. We do get on well. 3 years on, it's going great. It's going very well.
I thought David's got the personality to communicate a very, very difficult subject area, and I thought that the two of us could make it fun. So hopefully we have been able to do that. David, I was alluding to another event in your professional world. Are you giving congratulations, or is that all under wraps still?
To my wonderful team member?
Yes.
Yeah, my wonderful, and if she's listening, she's just the best lawyer, the best young lawyer I've come across in 20 years of legal practice. Wonderful, wonderful Jessica Westcott is leaving the coop, flying out after 5 years of wonderful legal work with David Bongiorno and Associates, wonderful migration work with David Bongiorno and Associates, a wonderful person, a magnificent person, and she is going off to join a lovely man who runs a wonderful corporate practice, and she will be a great addition to his team. And I can't thank Jess enough for 5 wonderful years of some really, really wonderful cases. Jessica Westcott, if you're listening, I'll remind you to listen. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful lawyer, migration agent, and friend. Wish you well.
And David, can you see what's sitting in the Pacific Ocean behind me off the shore of...
I can't, actually.
You can't? You can't see?
The tears, the ocean of tears. Well, I'll tell you what.
Can you see what that is?
What is? I haven't got my glasses on.
It's a big heart, and I put that there. We got the opportunity to speak about Jess.
Jessica Westcott, just a wonderful person, a wonderful lawyer, a wonderful migration agent, a wonderful person. And I've only cried twice in 20 years of legal practice. When I moved her admission and I had to speak, I was choking up. And when she told me the news that she was leaving, she's going to a great practice run by a gentleman, run by a lovely person, a good man, a very solid practitioner. a man who has migration at his heart. And it's a great adventure, a new adventure. And I just want to thank Jessica.
That's where I want to point that out, that it's not a case of Jess leaving because of grumpiness or anything.
Never.
You have a beautiful platform for Jess to proceed in the profession and as a migration specialist, and good on her.
Absolutely, 100%. In our practice, we do everything. She's going into a specialised corporate practice. It'll be a great opportunity for her. And James Hammond, who she's going to work with, will realise how lucky he is to have her. She's a fantastic person, a fantastic lawyer. And the only other time I cried, I teared up, was when she gave me the news yesterday.
Oh, well. It's a little while before she flies the coop, but I thought it was an opportunity for you to publicly acknowledge the work she's done. I know how much she supported you, and good luck.
She's saying, good luck, Jess. You're going to be wonderful. You are wonderful.
I think I've almost got to the end of everything. I just want people to know that hitting the feed shortly, we've got Shay McNamara, which is the sportsman that we talked about at the opening of the show, and Rohini from the Australian Immigration Museum. It's kind of sat there for a little while, but that's just about to come out too.
Both great guests, both of them.
And yeah, look, keep an eye out for the notifications on. Oh, well, that's what I did want to say. I have not been tending to Facebook and YouTube. There's been so much else to do, but that's going to start changing. So please, if you are a user of Facebook, like the Migrating to Australia podcast Facebook page, because that's where all the notifications go out. And there's going to be some special exclusives for Facebook and also for YouTube. And again, it's a way to put queries to us and maybe win some daggy things that we're going to be doing. So yes, great. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for watching. Those of you who were watching live, it's always fun. Thanks for the questions, Jesse. Everybody, feel free, even if it's off topic. That's what we're here for. That's why we're the number one in the number 3 migration show in the charts. But David, 20,000 people can't be wrong.
I think they're all right. I love the numbers, and thank you to all of you for listening. And I've been the recipient of a fair bit of feedback on Twitter and direct messages, so thank you for the feedback. It's a real pleasure to present the show. It's an honour to present the show, because what Grant and I always strive for is the truth, gospel truth, because there's so much floating in the ether about migration that's half correct or 100% incorrect. And we want to set it straight, make it clear, because migration is vital. It's important, and it's one of the biggest decisions you'll ever make in your life, and you've got to do it properly.
Absolutely. So I'm Grant Williams, and you can contact me at Work the Cloud Oz. Oh, was that me or was that you, David?
That was me. I actually got a phone call with Iran now, so we're always out, reaching out, talking to people from all parts of the world about migration.
And at David Bongiorno on both Twitter and Instagram. And of course, now I can confidently say, without letting you down, Migrating to Australia podcast.com. That's where you can book a lovely session with David to get your migration issues sorted. Thanks so much for being a part of it. Oh, hello, whoever's just joined in. Someone's just joined in, and we're about to go. Check out the website, migratingtoaustraliapodcast.com. Don't look at it today. Look at it next week. Bye.
Have a good one, everyone. Bye-bye.